It's 6:30, we get started. Mr. Lutz, you're up first.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Preliminary session, can you hear me all right? We're just here to talk about the proposed new site fill ordinance, which previously our site fill regulations have been buried in deflective, and we've been getting a lot of commentary and concern from residents all over the island. That I know you guys hear it all the time. We need to limit the amount of fill on undeveloped lots, or even lots with development. So this is kind of a first draft that we came up with to develop. Hopefully we'll have something finished by our next council meeting. We'll regulate fill in undeveloped property and even non-structural fill and lots that have houses on them already. I don't know if you guys have had time to look through it.
Did you model it after anybody? Any local municipalities?
Actually, found it in an ordinance in Texas is where I started. I found a fill ordinance in Texas of all places that seemed pretty good, and that's the basis for this one.
What about since we have the same problems as Charleston,
I
TOI?
haven't been able to find a good one locally. Actually, that's why I ended up using the shell from Texas.
What makes theirs not good?
They are, generally speaking, I was looking for something that was simple, easy to enforce, and limiting to a finite amount of fill on the property. A lot of them around all over town are tied to engineering studies and things that are not very black and white.
Gotcha.
This is kind of a starting point. The idea being that anything outside of the perimeter of a structure, i.e. anything outside the foundation, you'd be limited to fill essentially to the level of your adjacent property. If you've got a property where you have an elevation at the front that's here and an elevation at the back here, you'd have to slope your lot to match the neighboring properties. So you're not pushing water to your neighbors.
Is that the whole goal? I mean, I've got neighbors behind us that are interested in moving some water over to a ditch.
The goal
It's
here is
not
to-
in their footprint, so if they're doing this, they have to stay within their property line, basically. It's kind
They
of-
can push it within their property out to the drainage system, which typically around here is the street. Most of the lots out here, the natural drainage is the street or the ditches in front of the house. But the idea is they're not pushing it to either any of their neighbors, pushing it through the drainage system that exists. In some cases, that could be the marsh, if you're on the right kind of property.
There are some lots I know that they have a street, one side and a street on the other side. It's both of them through pavement or higher than the actual lot itself. So how would you drain that out? If somebody,
Some stuff like, there's always gonna be outliers that are different, and then you would have to get an engineer involved and either contain the water on the site, or take it to wherever the nearest drainage system is, be it pumping it or, I'm not sure. Most of the properties out here, you can find a path to get there if you're getting creative.
Eric, what if the existing lot, unbuilt lot, is already above the neighbor's grade? Does he have to take it down at all?
That's not in here right now, that could be added.
Well, I'm just asking.
That hasn't been discussed, but it's an interesting thought.
And Eric, can you talk just briefly about the difference between stormwater conveyance on and off a lot and interrupting the flow of floodwaters, like tidal flooding? I mean, which one of these does that address?
Well, it kind of addresses both in a way. The idea being that you can't build up your property to the point where you're gonna push or redirect water anywhere but the drainage system. Typically, this is primarily for stormwater runoff, but inherently, it kind of creates the same situation where you're not gonna, if you have tidal flooding, you're not gonna have a wall right there in front of your neighbor's property of dirt or mound or
Well,
ground.
and kind of back to the question, if the lot's never been developed, it's undeveloped, but it's higher than lots around it, this wouldn't address it because this is for filling dirt. This is for filling in lots, not naturally lots that are a higher elevation.
As designed right now, it's restricting.
Well, I understand, but part of the issue, when you and I visited properties that were like that, was that an existing property that's already higher to start with is flooded due to the construction, removal of trees and all the rest of it. It creates a drainage issue for the lower property. I didn't know if that's something that, because it's not being filled necessarily, if this is only for fill, then that's what it is, but. I was
That's
just
what
curious.
this is right
As it
now.
stands right now, this is all about fill that would be brought into the property.
Seems to me if you're getting ready to build a house next to a house that was built like in the 50s, and it was built low to the ground, if those people could rebuild, they would probably wish they could build higher. And yet now we're telling somebody who has a lot that they must make the same mistake that was made 70 years ago by building at the same level that the house next door was built at.
Well, we're not saying they have to build a house down there. We're saying that everything outside the foundation of the home. Now, inside the foundation where your garage slab, arc under, that can come up, but you have to retain it.
How far can that come
On the
up?
retaining wall. I think we targeted a limit of
1 foot?
1 foot, I believe, in
Oh,
here
I thought I read 1 foot before.
as a starting point.
Yeah.
Again, that's all up
So that's all you can do.
I mean, that's up, we can change it to whatever anybody
Okay,
wants,
all
but
right.
that's the starting point.
In other words, it seems to benefit everybody, the more resilient we are to flooding and such, because then we have fewer flood claims and everybody benefits by cheaper flood insurance. And if
And
we,
you do still have to elevate
Well-
the home itself to
Yeah.
the flood codes.
Yeah.
That's gonna happen no matter
I
what.
started to say the only thing that affects your flood insurance is when it gets into your house. And if your house around here is built 12 feet average, 10 feet, 11, 12 feet,
Up in
12 feet off the ground,
12 to 14.
and the water gets in your house for you to collect flood insurance, you got a lot more other problems.
well, I guess my point is, maybe you live on West Indian somewhere and your garage regularly floods.
Then I pump it out to the street. That's my problem.
It would be.
But it doesn't touch my house, and I can't collect insurance on it because they say, you know it floods, we're not paying for insurance for your house. The people with cars and stuff, they might pay one time, and then that's gonna be it. I have to catch flood water or hard rainwater and pump it to the storm drain.
In a situation like that, if you were building new, you would be allowed to bring your slab
Oh, if
up.
I was building new, I'd build on the high part of the ground, not the back of the lot.
You could also bring your garage slab up.
Yeah.
Higher and put a retaining wall around it. So you're only impacting actually under your structure.
This is all just about your actions not impacting your neighbor, basically.
That's the whole idea. Sure.
But that's already in ordinance, or that's not in ordinance?
It's not very clear and it's not very easy to enforce. That's kind of what we're targeting, something that it's very clear and distinct, it's easy for builders to understand, property owners to understand, easy for us to verify. And again, it's a work in progress at this point, just trying to figure it out. I'm gonna run this by some consultants as well, before there's an actual ordinance and see if they poke any holes in it.
But take it home and read it when you can't fall asleep at night and think about it. Because you might want to add something or take something away or say, hey, I found another one to look at somewhere else. And at least it's a starting point.
So I do have that, just to follow up with that, Mayor. So the next process would be more work on it, and then it would come back as an ordinance?
A proposed ordinance, and
Yeah.
you guys could add to it, take away from
Great research.
it. It's a start.
Thank you.
So Mr. Pope, you up for the rest of the meeting?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So Joe couldn't get in here, a few months ago, probably 6 months ago or so. Joe proposed that we look at our, schedule for retention of electronic records. The state has a pretty extensive set of rules and regulations for document retention, record retention, since we're a public body. We have to basically preserve all of our records, our business-related records. But the actual general schedules that they publish are silent on electronic versions of those things. If they exist in both places, you don't have to retain both. And so Joe wanted us to flesh out our policy on electronic records. And on page 4, section 104, 1.04, this would be an amendment to the handbook if we move forward with it. And everyone will have to sign it. But on page 4, section 1.04, I just want to call attention to the last sentence. nothing that we are proposing here is meant to exempt or take away the power of the general retention schedule. If there is a document type or record type that's covered by the state's retention schedule, and it only existed in its electronic form, we couldn't destroy it. But then over on page 5, this does acknowledge that there are certain electronic records that aren't covered by the retention schedule and aren't necessarily functions of the city's business, and that we're not required to retain those, and that we don't have to retain those. And in section 2.02, it's called disposable information. And this is information that's temporary, or it only has a temporary purpose. It's not directly related to the operation of the municipality. It's not covered by the general schedules. These would be like, an example I used, a text record, or a text message from me to the mayor. Hey, Mayor, what are you guys doing for dinner later? That is an electronic record that was created on city equipment, but it's not a record that needs to be retained for perpetuity and subject to the FOI. And it kind of goes into detail there what other examples of disposable information, junk emails, any email, text, or other methods of electronic communication that are entirely personal in nature, not related to the activities of the government, drafts of things that are circulated for comment, as long as they're not significant revisions. So if I've got 15 drafts of a letter and 13 of them are just minor typo corrections, those 13 don't need to be retained. I don't need to keep them or provide them if they are requested. So these are just examples of what Joe classifies as disposable records that we don't need to retain. Adopting this policy would give us the ability to create a schedule, which we don't have yet, but create our own custom schedule of deletion and retention periods. So we could say, for example, that everyone with a city cell phone needs to delete all their disposable records every 30 days or every 7 days, so that we have a firm policy for retention of disposable electronic records that are not covered by the state law. And that way, if anyone ever comes back to the city and says, I need Councilman Rich's, every text Councilman Rich has ever sent from his phone, because this, you have a city cell phone? Yeah. Every text, we can say, well, 5,542 of these 10,000 texts are personal in nature, they're disposable, they didn't serve a purpose for business, and they've been deleted, and we would be okay because we have that policy. So that's what Joe is proposing. And if you guys are okay with that, we'll move forward with a resolution to bring back to you in the next month or so.
Sounds good. 10,000 texts.
All the
You been
time.
busy.
Have you looked through my phone?
Turn the lighting.
All right, the last one is a conversation starter. The particular version that you have started one place, went to another place, and now we're kind of proposing it to you guys to see what you think and which direction we should go. Our turtle team suggested that we may look at the lights out for sea turtle hours. Right now, our current ordinance says that basically house lighting goes off at 10 o'clock. Grounds lighting, public street lighting, dune walkover lighting that's over the dune line, that goes off at nighttime. But there's a different set of hours for the house, structure lighting, which is 10 p.m. versus nighttime. So the turtle team actually requested, let's just change that to 9 p.m. And I intervened and Googled around and saw where a few communities actually have it go off at nighttime to match the other lights. So just like your dune crossover walk has to go off at nighttime, your house would have to go off at nighttime. And so I drafted it up to say nighttime, knowing that you guys might have opinions and thoughts and want to go with a fixed time or not. The idea being that 9 p.m. in October is very much darker and different than 9 p.m. in August. And so setting it at nighttime would cover all the dark hours, regardless of what time of the year it was. And that's it. So that's
The official nighttime hours are, as published by the Weather Service.
And that matches our golf cart ordinance where we don't put that, when we set sunrise and sunset time. So if you guys like nighttime, we can go with nighttime. If you like 9 PM, we can go at 9 PM.
Nighttime's good.
Like around nighttime.
I like, yeah, nighttime,
Nighttime.
flexible. Because we're seeing the absolute time. So if the PSOs have to write a ticket, they can find out what the absolute sunset time is, then they'll know.
All right.
And that's not too, I like, it's vague, I guess, in the statement. Is it challengeable or more challengeable if you get a ticket? I'm just wondering how other municipalities have.
Well, then that's where the definition of nighttime comes from. It's
Yeah.
any time between the official published sunset and sunrise time. Our golf cart ordinance says from dusk till dawn, which is 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after. But this is more specific to the moment of.
All right.
And so I can say, we did not put this in an ordinance, I mean, it is drafted as an ordinance, but it's not for a vote tonight because we want you guys to have time to react to it. So we'll bring it back next month for first reading. And hopefully by then we may get some feedback from owners or rental managers or folks who live on the front beach, and they can tell us what they think of nighttime.
Okay? You got a break for 15 minutes unless y'all got a question of Mr. Pope? Any more? All right.